so we'll wait on the bill.
Well, Terry, you remember I was talking about that atomic clock?
That's what we need.
Mayor, the bell's not going to ring on half hour
So
though.
we'll wait on
Just
the
remember.
bill.
But, yeah.
Well, it's not.
No, not on the half hour.
I'm just looking at,
Yeah, it rings on the hour.
5:28.
All right, let's call the meeting to order and we'll get started. First thing on the agenda is a resolution to amend the town of Somerville's organizational chart. Who's got that?
Mr. Mayor, I would move approval of the resolution to amend the chart. I do have an amendment to it, but for purposes of getting started, I will move approval.
I'll second.
Mr. Mayor, I would now move to amend the resolution. I think it was just inadvertent, but one change got left out. So on the second whereas clause, after it says to include court to report to clerk of court, I would add to make the position of economic development manager a department head. And that would be my amendment.
I'll second that.
Okay, that's a motion and an amendment, Bill.
Right now, I've moved to amend it, and Mr. Jenkins has seconded my motion to amend. So we'd have to hear the motion to amend first.
Okay. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. Any discussion on that?
Yeah, I've got some discussion. I see the economic development manager, economic development department head. I'm looking at the chart. Am I missing something here?
There's also a written resolution, Councilman Brown, that records the changes from the previous org chart, and it just got inadvertently left out. As you see the under assistant town administrator, which on the chart where it says economic development, that's now a green box indicating a department head, and it just got left out of the written resolution by mistake.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor, signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
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 Opposed likewise? Ayes carry, unanimous. Okay, now we'll go back and vote on the resolution. We got a motion and a second on the resolution. If no discussion, all in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
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 Opposed likewise? The ayes carry, unanimous. Okay, Ms. Beth, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. First reading of an ordinance to amend the Town of Somerville's Code of Ordinances, Chapter 2, Administration, Article 1 in general, Section 2-6, Municipal Court.
Mr. Mayor, I would move first reading of the ordinance.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made and seconded that we amend the Town of Somerville's Code of Ordinances for the municipal court. Any discussion on this?
Just for information purposes, Mr. Mayor, this amendment is really just intended to bring our current ordinance regarding the municipal court in harmony with the state statute. The language changes in the ordinance simply make it consistent with the state statute governing municipal courts.
Anything else? Anybody got anything else on this? If not, all in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
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 Opposed likewise? The ayes carried. Unanimous. Okay, 4, Ms. Beth.
First reading of an ordinance proposed to repeal and replace in its entirety the Somerville Unified Development Ordinance adopted October 10th, 2019, as last amended December 10th, 2020, with former Town Code, Chapter 32 zoning, Chapter 22 stormwater management, Chapter 20 Article 2 Planning Commission, and Article 3 Development Standards, Section 20-71 roads, and Chapter 6 Article 3 flood damage prevention as existing upon repeal on October 10th, 2019.
Mr. Mayor, I move we give first reading to the ordinance as written.
Okay, I'll second that. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, if I might, I voted for the UDO about a year ago, whenever it was passed by council. I did that with some trepidation. And what motivated me to finally go ahead and vote for it was because a specific subdivision was being developed, and there was some concern by the neighbors, and I thought that passing the UDO might help the design standards. I've been on council about 12 years now, and the thing I regret the most is voting for the UDO. It's a very complex ordinance. In my opinion, it was well intended, and there are some good things in there, but there are a whole lot more bad things than the good. I don't think it can be fixed by amendment. I think what it does, it overregulates all aspects of real property ownership. It infringes on private property rights, and I've seen the application work hardship on our citizens, and I think it's time to go ahead and admit we made a mistake in passing that, and to repeal it with the understanding that we could bring back specific parts of it on an as-needed basis. If our planning staff feels particularly strong on some specific aspect of it, they can bring it to council. I would not want to see any consultants involved again, because that was a nightmare. But again, I think that we need to go ahead and just go back to what we had before. It was working better as far as our citizens are concerned.
Thank you, sir. Any other discussion?
Yes, I've got a few things I need to say. This particular development that Walter referred to is in my district and close to his district. His district adjoins mine. And I understand there, to repeal it, we would go back to what we formerly had, what was the old town code, chapter 32. And, but this thing created a lot of problems for it. And I guess it opened my eyes up to a lot of things, because I assumed at the time that we passed this UDO that we had covered this issue, because back in like October of 2019, we were told by the administration that, they'd put this thing to bed, and that we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. And then it resurfaced again. And but I've got a couple of questions. One question is, I noticed we refer here also to the change back. It also deals with the Planning Commission. And I know under the Planning Commission, as we're dealing with it now, each council member has an appointment to that Planning Commission, right? So will that still be the case, or will this change that?
Mr. Brown, it should not change that. That we instituted that change about how planning commissioners are appointed prior to giving approval to the UDO.
Okay. Second question I've got, thanks, Bill, is how will flooding problems be handled? We've had a lot of problems with flooding in various places in the town, but particularly in my district and some in Walter's district too. And so by repealing the UDO, are we going to be more aggressive on handling flooding problems, or are we going to be more lax on handling flooding problems?
Aaron, we're going to be just as to answer your question, we gonna handle these flooding problems just like we handle them now, which is just as hard as we can and as fast as we can. Our stormwater department is going just as hard as they can go handling these flooding problems. We're using up every bit of manpower we got addressing these flooding problems. We are replacing a lot of pipes and Corey Woods. We took that on as a project because of the water that was getting in houses out there from those 2 storms we had where we had 4 or 5 inches of rain in an hour. And a couple more places. And you know about the Russell Givens report Thursday night, the meeting, but this won't affect the flooding problems at all. You know, we hopefully next year in the budget, we'll put on a whole nother crew of stormwater people. And it's, you know, to my knowledge, it's not going to affect that at all.
All right, well, that was one of my concerns, because we've really got some serious flooding problems as we have new growth come in. And the old sections that see a lot of flooding.
Mr. Mayor, I've had the opportunity to, since we've raised 2 issues in this, one is the Design Review Board and the other being the UDO. And I've had a chance to talk to a few people on the Design Review Board, and actually very interesting comments to me from them. Two ways. One, their belief that the UDO as a document has some very beneficial aspects when we're dealing with new development, such as the Salisbury tract or the Hoyer tract. But when it comes to dealing with Somerville, it's very ineffective and it is an obstacle at times. And their desire, but which actually surprised me, is a wish that the DRB and council and staff could find a better way to work together that takes us out of the legal aspect of how do you try to do things that are best for the town. And so I just took that as a positive view of some members of the Design Review Board, that they would like to work more closely, not only with staff, which they do now, but with council, to make sure that we're kind of all aligned on what we would like to be trying to do and understand everybody better, which right now there's very little interface or interaction between council and the Design Review Board. So I think it's an opportunity for us to look at how we might do that better as we go forward.
Thank you, sir. Any other discussion?
Mr.
Yeah.
Mayor, go ahead. Kim, go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say, I understand your feelings about repealing this and taking a closer look at things. It is a disappointment because, you know, staff and council did work like an entire year on this. And it was, it took a lot of time going through this UDO. But I can see some of the advantages of repealing it and taking some closer look at some items. I'm going to go ahead and vote on this, but I do have some reservation, but I understand that this is also just the first reading.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I want to just echo Ms. Gardner-Smith's comments. I mean, I can vote for this for first reading. I mean, I expect to be able to vote for it for second reading. As what Councilman Bailey said, we want staff, we want members of the community, property owners, come to us, our planning commissioners, obviously this will go to planning commission. They will have it for at least one meeting, probably more. They will conduct a public hearing, which is required under our ordinances on this. So, I mean, I want to hear from our planning commissioners. I'm delighted to hear that some of our design review board members are actually see this as a potential positive. But for me, this process on the UDO was flawed from the very beginning. And I remember exactly how we started down this path, how it was essentially pitched to us as an opportunity in the vision plan to elevate our design standards, to make sure that what was built in Somerville was of a higher quality than what had been built recently. And we were pitched with form-based zoning, which that if you elevate your design standards to such a high degree that you make otherwise incompatible uses compatible. It all sounded very good to me. I'm still a proponent of form-based zoning over use-based zoning. But the reality is the document that was provided to us by the consultants was a nightmare. It was not Somerville specific. It was cookie cutter. It was absurd how much money we paid for this very uninspired document. And as Councilwoman Gardner-Smith says, the Planning Commission first, and then council spent just innumerable hours trying to make a really poor document workable. And I voted for it on first reading. I didn't vote for it on second reading. But you know, and the reasons for both. Interestingly, the first reading was, we were told that the pending ordinance doctrine would apply to that particular controversial neighborhood in Germantown. And right after we gave first reading, we were told, no, actually that wasn't true, that they had gotten in under the wire and the pending ordinance doctrine would not apply. So I really kind of regret my vote for first reading under those facts. There are some things in the UDO that I think we should try to preserve. We certainly want to hear from staff and our planning commissioners. For me personally, I'd like to see if we can keep the zoning classifications in the zoning map. And so sometime between first reading and the second reading, it will have to be amended if we do intend to keep the zoning map as it is. And that's my desire, but so I hope that we, between first and second reading, have a better document, a better plan than what we had on October the 9th, 2019, before we gave second reading to the UDO. But if I had to choose between what we had on October 9th, 2019 and what we had on October 10th, I'd be forced to choose what we had on October 9th.
Mr. Mayor, what were the two things, the zoning maps and?
You know, the zoning classifications,
Okay.
we have more zoning classifications under the UDO that do provide property owners ostensibly with more flexibility. And frankly, I've talked to some property owners today that have invested in their property solely because of the new zoning classification that they got under the UDO. And I'm not looking to downzone anybody or create any more non-conforming uses than we possibly have to. So my hope would be that between first reading and second reading, that we will move to amend and preserve the zoning map under the UDO.
Mr. Mayor, may I speak again?
Yes, sir.
I've written some questions down that I asked myself when I was thinking about this situation. Those people over there in the Germantown area in my district have went through a lot of heartache and fought the situation best they could. And they finally thought that we had solved the problem. Lo and behold, the problem wasn't solved. But my question is, whose fault is it that an undesirable development in this district was not stopped when the administration or the council had the chance? Number two, why was not council notified that this outfit was again pursuing building rental clusters of single rental homes in a residential district when they had promised not to do it before? Why isn't council informed of pending problematic developments like this ahead of time? The residents who were told that this developer would not do rental homes were misled. They are furious, and so am I as their council rep, because I'm also catching a lot of heat on this thing. Perhaps this UDO has outlived its time. Maybe it's time that we salvage what we can of this UDO and we move on and go back to the code and improve as we go along. I just feel that someone is to blame. We got over 400 employees, and I just think that we need to take a close look at this. Someone is to blame. I just don't think it was handled properly. I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, but I think this is something I need to say.
So I want to speak, Mr. Mayor, if you'll let me for a second.
Yes, ma'am.
I see Mr. McIntosh shaking his head. A couple things. There is nothing that we can put in a zoning or land development regulation ordinance that will stop, that can discriminate against home ownership or rental property. It is illegal, and I'm sorry if anyone misled you that you could do that. There's nothing you can do. You cannot discriminate against a piece of property because it is owned or rented. That's just not something you can do. And I think that from what I know and what I've found out, you guys learned about the property not going to home ownership, but being, continuing to be developed as rental, this actually before the staff did.
Well, I'd like to be heard on that issue then. The reality is, I think everybody on council understands you can't regulate home ownership, or you can't prevent a corporation from owning property. There are actually potential zoning restrictions in certain areas, potential zoning classifications that could require homeowner occupancy. I don't particularly want to move to that, but it is an option there that you have to provide some areas in town where that could be rented, but you don't have to do it in every area of town. The problem is I don't really want to interfere with individuals' rights to rent out their property and to interfere with their property rights that way by zoning, but it actually legally can be done. But the issue with this particular development was this: that we were told that elevated design standards, and I believe that elevated design standards could make a development like this economically just not feasible or not attractive, and that giving first reading would put this would get to the wire first and would the pending ordinance doctrine would apply. That turned out to be inaccurate information. I'm not blaming anybody. It just was inaccurate information. So the first reading itself did not cause the UDO to apply to this development. We were aware of that. However, during the many weeks of workshops between the first reading and second reading several months later, at some point we were told that this development was not going forward as a rental neighborhood, that the national corporation out of California that was developing it was going to sell to a home builder, and the home builder was going to sell houses to the public that could be owner occupied. And that didn't happen. And at the time, well, everybody was relieved that it looked like this neighborhood was not going forward, not because of the UDO, but because of the pressure and the opposition to it, the ball got, nobody followed up, nobody made sure that there was actually a contract to sell to this builder. I'm really of the opinion at this point that we were simply being misled by the national corporation out of California. I'm not sure they ever reduced any of their representations to writing. And it's just disappointing. The reality is that 15, 16 months later, we find out from members of the public that we were lied to by the misled anyway, if not flat out lied to by this national corporation in California. And it's always disappointing when members of the public know things about what's going on with development and land use in our town before elected officials do. So anyway, I do think that the lack of communication that Councilman Brown is concerned about really has caused the implementation of the UDO to be rockier than it had to be. Each of us have different specific concerns about the language in the UDO, and really thought that we would have a real opportunity to amend it. And my concerns might not be the same as Councilman Bailey's, whose might not be the same concerns as Councilman Brown's, but I think we're all very disappointed in the application of the UDO, particularly as it applies to our citizens who are not developers, who are not engaged in land development. They may have bought a single lot to build a single family house on it to live in potentially for the rest of their lives. And they actually, in the application of the UDO, they actually have at times more obstacles to jump over to build a single family home on a lot that they own than a tract builder might to build 100 homes on 15 acres. And there's just, as we went through the UDO and the innumerable, interminable workshops, as much as we could, the more onerous provisions in the UDO, we tried our best to apply those to subdivisions of 5 lots or more, because as council, we recognize that somebody building a lot on their own property, or maybe even buying a piece of property and subdividing it to build a house for themselves and maybe a parent or a child next door, that is not a developer and that is not a development. But the UDO, as applied, treats them that way.
Mayor, may I speak?
Yes, sir.
I am in favor of the UDO. I don't think it's perfect. I think it can be changed by amendments when we have specific problems. Talked with 2 councilmen. I haven't heard a problem with the UDO yet. All I have heard is problem with the application of the UDO. And I think that is a different conversation. We worked 4.5 years, spent $250,000 on this ordinance. And if it would have been in place before that development, like Councilman McIntosh said, that development may not happen because of economics. When we take away that UDO, we may end up with 6 of those developments, because all of a sudden we get to make decisions like we have in the past that lets one developer do one thing and another developer do something else. The UDO, we can talk about how it is applied and get some agreement with staff. But this is holding people responsible for sticking to a set of guidelines, and people can't come to a councilman and say, hey, I got a problem, and the councilman change it. I don't like the way it worked before.
everybody wasn't treated the same in my mind. And I think we can talk about the application and change things that aren't working. The island that was at the gas station that came up, our planning staff, nobody on council went and said, can we help this guy out? So what was, and that was a mess from the beginning. So I think we have a communication application problem, and I hate to see us do away with a set of rules where council can kind of bend and twist the rules the way they want. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion before we call for the question? Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand and saying aye.
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 Mr. Mayor, can I ask,
Huh? How many we got, Beth? Hold your hand up. Hold your hand up in front of you. Hold your hand up in front of your face, please.
5?
Huh? Aaron, you got your hand up?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't see your hand.
You can't see. Hold your hand up in front of your face where she can see it.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I see 6.
6.
Yes, sir.
Okay, opposed? Okay. 6-1. 6-1.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask one question?
Yes, ma'am.
Can someone give me some clear direction on the next steps so that we can kind of move forward as a whole? What all of council would like us to do with the UDO and the planning, everything now? We kind of need some direction on where we're going to go, and we're happy to do it. We just don't really know right now what we're doing.
Right now, Ms. Rebecca, is to keep doing just what you've been doing. That's just first reading. That doesn't stop everything. And in the meantime, ask staff if they would take out of the UDO the most important things that they think we need in the UDO and start putting it together to bring back to us by the February meeting. I mean, by the March meeting. And in the meantime, we want to get together, council and you set up those workshops where we can meet with you, not to discuss necessarily those things that we were asking them to get together, but with you to talk about what your thoughts are and our thoughts are as far as the UDO is concerned. And we'll do that just as fast as you want to set those meetings up. Is that fine with council?
Mr. Mayor, I concur with everything you just said. I would just add that, we're the idea, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I think the idea is that we want to incorporate what we find positive about the UDO into whatever zoning ordinance we have. So just to counter a little bit what Councilman Jackson says, I don't foresee us ever going upon second reading of repealing the UDO to going precisely to where we were on October 9th of 2019 with the old ordinances, that we will, by input from the Planning Commission and citizens and staff, we will be able to incorporate the most critical elements of the UDO, such as the zoning map, into the replacement ordinance before the UDO is repealed. And to that point, I think that, the Planning Commission is going to want to take some time with this, I'm sure, but I think we also want to keep this process moving, just as you said, Mr. Mayor. So I would just implore staff to have this issue on the Planning Commission's agenda for February 22nd. And if we're still within the timeline for the notice of the public hearing, if it's a 15-day notice and not a 30-day notice, that we allow for the required public hearing to be at the February 22nd meeting of the Planning Commission.
So it's your expectation that there's a document for the planning commission to review and for the public to review and have a public hearing by February 20, by what date?
Whatever the date of the next planning commission meeting is. I thought it was the 22nd.
It is the 22nd. I find it impossible to have a document ready by that time, however.
I don't think we need a document. I mean,
They have to have a public hearing on the proposed ordinance.
the proposed ordinances, the ordinances that were in place prior to the adoption of the UDO. What we're looking for from the public, the planning commissioners, staff, is what in the UDO is worth preserving and incorporating into our prior ordinances. If the answer is nothing, then nothing. If the answer is everything, then it'll probably also be nothing.
I think it would be helpful to have more input from council as to exactly what y'all have concerns about in the current UDO, rather than starting from scratch again, per se. But if that's how you want us to handle it, I'll do my best.
So if you guys could send Beth maybe some dates that you can give, maybe 2 hours to me, so we can go through and have that conversation, so we can get some specifics of, kind of what's the goal of the changes, what are the sections we need to look for. I think I've got some of the ideas of, the existing businesses and the existing properties. That's kind of where some of the rub is, so we can look at some of those things. So if you guys could maybe give Beth some dates, maybe 2 hours or so, and we'll go ahead and try to get it as quickly as possible on everybody's schedule, so we can get some guidance to where when the planning commission meets, they kind of know what we're talking about. At least they have some idea of at least the path that we're taking, or the things that we need to talk about and get opinions about, so that we can then, change those sections.
I think, if I might, that we're making something really difficult out of something fairly simple. If I might, we're simply doing away with the UDO, and at the same time leaving the door open for planning staff to come to us with a limited amount of changes that they would like to, a limited amount of things in the UDO that they would like to retain. And it would be a pick and choose thing. I have no intention and will not participate in another series of debates in the guise of a workshop that we went through 20 some odd debates last year. I found it unproductive, and I just won't do that. I think it needs to be the focus on the part of staff needs to be very, very limited what they can do, because if you hit us with everything, like Mr. McIntosh said, you might as well hit us with nothing.
And to be clear, the burden is on staff to let us know what they think is indispensable in the UDO, and we will decide what, if anything, to preserve from the UDO. The burden's not on us.
I think all of you, we're trying to figure out what issues you want to address so that we can address them properly. So there's no burden on either party. We're just trying to figure out what the actual issues are. So then that's what we can keep, or that's what we can suggest to you to keep. So without any communication back and forth, I'm not real sure that we know what to even look at.
Well, that will make it very simple. We'll just do away with the UDO and revert back to what we had before. We'll retain the zone categories in the map.
Correct.
Awesome. All right.
What I'm hearing, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, council has made a decision. And staff, it sounds to me like, at least from what I'm hearing coming out of your mouth, Rebecca, is that you would like us to tell you what we think is wrong with the UDO so that we can try to fix the UDO. No, what's wrong is the UDO, and we're getting rid of the UDO. So but we recognize, as I did in talking to a couple of people on the DRB is that there are elements of the UDO that are beneficial to people. We are not, I'm not an expert in this area. I'm assuming you are, and Jesse is, and Madeline and others are. And so there are elements that I would assume that y'all understand that how the UDO deals with, for argument's sake, downtown Somerville is different from how it deals with the Salisbury tract or the other new developments that are in. And so my hope is that y'all bring back the stuff that y'all think needs to be dealt with, y'all to us, not us to y'all. And we'll deal with those if we think we should retain them.
Could we at least have the benefit of what you guys think is beneficial in the UDO? So that can at least steer us in the right direction. It's a pretty large document. Could we have that benefit as we're working through this in the limited amount of time that we have? Nope.
In my mind, the one area, and I'm not familiar enough because I didn't go through the 26 meetings of reading the UDO and trying to revise the UDO. From what I hear from others, the parts of it that relate to broad new developments, be they commercial or residential, there are parts of that that would be very beneficial for the town to have. I can't be specific about it because I don't know.
No, but that's good. That's a good help.
And I'll try to be a little more specific, Rebecca. The things that I like about the zoning classifications and the maps is not just the headache that changing the zoning map would mean for all of us, including our citizens, is that expanding the number of classifications to give some property owners anyway, particularly in the downtown area, more flexibility was way overdue. These more multi-use classifications, both residential based and commercial based, that allow for flexibility of use in the downtown area. I think I think we all saw the benefit of that. So that's the fact that at least on paper, many of our property owners in the downtown commercial, downtown business areas had more possibilities for the development, redevelopment of their property. I think most of us saw that as a real positive, at least on paper. A separate issue, an issue that's related but still separate, is the application of that. That some of the obstacles that the UDO or interpretations or applications of the UDO cause and it is causing and have caused some of our property owners is a completely different, in my mind, issue. But the zoning classifications themselves allowing for more varied uses, I think all of us see as a positive, at least in our downtown area.
I don't want to take up any of y'all more time, but if there are any things that you feel that are beneficial that you would like to send to me, that would be great to help in our process. So thank you.
In general terms, what's beneficial as far as I'm concerned is giving the property owners flexibility, which I thought was sort of the basis of form-based zoning, that you looked at the structure and not at the use necessarily. And don't come to us with wanting to preserve a lot of these man restrictions and all that are working a hardship.
I think that the part of the UDO that's got some promises, the part that would protect areas like from the type of development that we're talking about now in the Germantown area, which is basically a historic district, and we need to try to preserve or protect those areas of town that are just being, in some cases, overdeveloped. I agree with Terry. If you're talking about the Hoyer track or the Salisbury track or these large tracks, that's different. But I think the older part of Somerville needs to be preserved or protected. And I know people have got property rights and we can't tell them what to do with their property, but we should give them guidelines so that people who have bought properties in those areas, like we're talking about, should not have to worry if a year or 2 years after they bought their homes, or 3 years or 4 years, that somebody's going to come in and develop their property and reduce properties next door to them that could possibly destroy the neighborhood and the ambience of the area and the reason that they bought that home in the first place, and lower their property values.
All right, is that all? And I think it might be an ongoing thing, Rebecca, because people think of something that they can throw your way, Jesse's way, to help. We can continue to do that as soon as possible. Okay, next thing on the agenda is executive session.
We have legal and personnel matters. Legal matter regarding proposed listing agreement, contract, and agent for the sale of town-owned real property described as follows: 213 West 2nd South Street, TMS 13707040007, 208 Cedar Street, TMS 13707040005, and 213 West Richardson Avenue, TMS 13707040002. Also, personnel matter regarding the Somerville Police Department and personnel matter regarding the town of Somerville Municipal Court.
Okay, I
Mr.
have a
Mayor.
motion that we go into executive session.
I'll
Mr.
make
Mayor,
that, Mayor.
I'll second.
Second. Okay, all in favor, signify by raising your right hand, saying aye.
All right.
I,
Opposed likewise. Okay, we're going to executive session. Lenny, let us know.
Okay, Mayor, I think you're good. You have all council and GW, Madeline, and Rebecca currently in there, and that's it.
All righty.